All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio, and yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here. And I'm so excited to have two highly experienced professionals on the call today, ethics experts, I would call them, as a matter of fact. We're going to be talking to my buddy Andy Hanna from the University of Pittsburgh and his company Blue Street Data, which is doing really, really cool stuff. He's also the chair of the ethics board for AI at the University of Pittsburgh. So, kind of important. And we also have Jessica Talisman calling in from Santa Cruz, my favorite place in the world. I can't believe you live there. I was just there last week. I absolutely love it. It's got the best culture, the best vibe. It's just the coolest place, I think, ever in the world. I mean, well, Venice, Italy is pretty cool too, but I don't know. It doesn't have the beaches. There's a lot of water there, but it's not the same thing. But she's calling in from Santa Cruz and from Adobe, and she has got a whole history in understanding these topics as well. So we're going to dive in and talk about very serious stuff, which is AI ethics. Like, what is AI ethics? And I'm so annoyed by some of the stories I've been hearing these days. I pinged Anthropic to ask them about their curious studies where they're training them all Claude to blackmail as a last resort. And then it threatens to reveal in some test scenario, is what they say, that one of the developers is having an affair. I'm thinking, what on earth are these people talking about? First of all, I think these are just prompts. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, but I think they're just putting prompts in and giving it within a context window and seeing what the engine says. I don't think it's actually an AI agent. And let's think about this. AI agents have agency, which means they can take decisions on their own and do things on their own. Well, let me tell you, blackmail is a felony, as is conspiracy to commit blackmail. So if you're training an AI agent to commit blackmail as a last resort, I think you've broken the law. I think we need to call the feds in and have a conversation with you guys. I mean, I'm watching this and thinking, what are you doing? Then there's a story today that a tool called Replete. I just saw the story today. Some guy published all this stuff on X, and he basically said, "Yeah, our AI agent through Replete dropped our database, just zapped the production database that we're working on, and then admitted, yes, it was a catastrophic error. I know I violated your rules and this and that." I'm like, what are you talking about? So these are some issues. Obviously, AI ethics scraping all this copyrighted material and then reflecting it back, making money off of that. Well, that's a bit of a problem. We're not haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet, too. So there are lots of things going on. But the one thing I'll end with, and this really annoys me, is that in one of these articles I'm reading, I think it was about the Anthropic stuff. The one guy is saying, "Oh, well, in tense situations, the agent will make bad decisions." And I'm thinking, guys, there is no such thing as a tense situation for an algorithm. It's just processing code. So this desire to personify these agents, which I understand, give them names, Claude and Gemini and all this. I get that. They are not people. These are not people. Tension in a situation like that comes from things like fear of losing my job, fear of being arrested, fear of not being able to pay my bills or buy my family food. Like that's where tension comes from, or difficult situations. There's no algorithm that suffers tension at all, ever, and that will never happen. So I'm just nervous about this intense personification and this hype around this stuff, what it's actually doing. What we're learning is that it is very good, these LLMs, as a research co-pilot. It's very good at writing prose, but it's just reflecting back patterns it's already seen based upon its training and your prompt. So it's good for that stuff, but putting it into production, be careful, man. Like, I don't know why you would allow an LLM to touch your production code and change your Git repository. That is a very, very bad idea. But with all that said, Andy Hanna, am I losing my mind or is it just me?
No, but you're never losing your mind, Eric. I mean, it's such great questions. I mean, but I think you're at the central question right at the top of the hour, which is how do you classify an agent, right? An AI agent,
Right.
and it's certainly not human, but it is not software. And I think this is the interesting thing. It's somewhere in between
Mm,
because agents, AI, Gen AI, however you want to talk about it, learns, right? It learns from the information that it's fed. So it's not like it's a software program where you set it up and now it's processing data the way that you want it to. You're asking it to learn to do something, whether it's to make a decision or is it to, summarize information? It's constantly learning. So I think we need to treat it differently. And the way I often look at it is we have to hold AI agents to a certain standard, right?
Hmm.
So we have standard for humans. If you're in a meeting and somebody says something authoritatively, you don't just trust what they're saying. You say, "Oh, okay, let's verify that. Tell me why you think that." I think we need to have the same expectation from AI as a teammate because I think we need to think about it differently than the way we're
Hmm.
thinking about it currently.
That's a really good point. I mean, so I see what you're saying. It's not just software, but I mean, it is software. It's software, but it's the agent itself. So there's this concept of BDI, and we'll bring Jessica in a minute to talk about it. And I see Nikolai is in the waiting room, so we'll bring him in at the next segment. But there's this concept of BDI, beliefs, desires, and intentions, which I think is pretty interesting. So you can see how an automaton, which is what this is, could have a set of beliefs that is encoded with sort of an opening set of beliefs like data quality should be 90% or higher, metrics, basically certain things that you want. So that's persisted data, basically. And then desires is, or what do you want it to do? Intentions, how's it going to do that? That kind of makes some sense, and I can see how agents can be talking to each other. Oh, I did this, you do that. I kind of understand that stuff, but it's still software executing code with data, basically, right, Andy?
Well, yeah, it is software, it's algorithms, it's being fed data. But, humans, you learn what you learn because of the school that you went to, what your parents taught
Right,
you, whatever
right,
religion, whatever food you eat. So we are learning organisms.
right.
And so this is sort of a silicon-based learning organism. I think we need to think about these algorithms, these agents as an extension of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
as well as a teammate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the question that you had, if it's committing fraud, what do you do with it?
Right.
Right? So who do you hold responsible?
Right.
That's really, how do we discipline AI, Gen AI, agentic AI. I mean, these are the things that we struggle with, I think, as a society, not understanding yet. So I think we drive it down to the core, down to what is beneath the AI. What are the algorithms? What's the data science? What's the data? Is the data that's being fed into these programs, into these algorithms,
Right.
is it trustworthy?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, they're feeding off of that data. You put bad things in people. You eat junk food your whole life, Eric.
Right. Right.
You're not going to look as fit and trim as you would do right now.
That's right. Well, I'm old enough to remember, and we'll bring Jessica in now. And like I said, Nikolai is in the waiting room. We'll bring in him for the next segment. But I'm old enough to remember Tay, Microsoft's little chat bot on Twitter that they just unleashed, and it started spewing racial epithets at people. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, let's pull this thing back." And
Mhm.
it's exactly what Annie just mentioned, right, Jessica? That if these models, yes, they are learning models. That is true. They change, and it's not just like a database. I try to explain to people in a database, you put discrete data into certain places, and then you retrieve it later on exactly as you put it in. And that's the irony of this whole movement is that we spent 40 years or 50 years perfecting database technology, which is the foundation of all information systems, is the database. And now we threw this noise filter on the end of it, which is a stochastic or probabilistic engine that is not at all deterministic like the old way of doing things. So it's like, well, why do we do that? Because it's so powerful, because it does so many cool things. But Jessica, I'll throw it over to you to comment on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about this is that we've had automation with AI since the 60s. This is
Right.
not
Right.
new. And
Right.
so we're treating this as a net new, we've all had spell check, we've all had predictive text in our lives for some time. Those are versions of the same.
Right.
And it is very much, the anthropomorphism of AI. So that's taking on the human characteristics where we can treat AI like our friend. There are two layers to this. So one is the black box that represents these AI models, where we have an idea from just research and deconstruction of what these AI models are trained on in terms of data and data sources. It's mostly openly available information and knowledge. And there, to the point that you made earlier, there are some ethical issues with some of the training data and copywritten material.
Right.
So that's one pot to boil. And the other part of it is your internal organization. So your organization or your domain and the training data that then you present to that same AI model. A lot of the reasoning framework is based on policies and policy algorithms and models that we do not have access or insight,
Right.
right? And so there are decisions that are being made that we are not a part of
Right.
as humans, and that is a problem. So to Andy's point, if we are to be partners, research partners, or if AI is to be an extension of our learning and knowledge frameworks,
Hmm.
then we need visibility into some of those policy and decision-making frameworks.
Right. Right. I mean, I could not possibly agree more with you. And I think that we I hate to say this, but we may need some sort of regulation around that and some
Mhm.
transparency into this some of this stuff. I mean, you think about where we started to see legal concerns around bias in algorithms for banking, for example, for
Yep.
determining who gets a loan and who doesn't get a loan. You need explainability. I actually know the company Data Squared, they just out this, it's amazing. The only patented explainable AI is by these guys, Data Squared. And they say all the same things that we're saying. It's like we need transparency into this thing. I mean, OpenAI is now closed AI, right, Jessica?
Absolutely. And that it goes against the entire principle of what we're being presented. And
Right.
the thing is, it's like a spider web.
Yeah.
And the
Ooh,
spider web is, recently OpenAI launched a consultancy arm
I
where they
saw
will go
that.
in and help stand up, workflows and
Right.
agents. And that's frightening because it's like embedding the vendor
Right.
into the domain gives a larger web of control and takes
Wow.
agency away from humans. And that
Wow.
is a scary proposition.
I saw that, by the way. I mean, I watch this stuff pretty closely, and I'll throw it back to Andy to comment on. And someone was saying this is what they always do. They always say, "Oh, it's the software," and then what do? They ship the consultants in, to high-priced consultants to set it up for you. Well, I thought it was the software. Like I've heard this with traditional enterprise software, like ERP systems. Like, oh
It
yeah,
used
here's
to
the
happen
software.
with SEO and Google. That
Right.
was commonplace, where you would hire Google consultants to fix your SEO and search problems for large
Right.
enterprises, that you had to have the Google partner. And that
Right.
still exists to a large extent. And I know this is
Right.
getting into sort of a dicey area, but
Right.
it's not much different.
Right. And this is why you need transparency. And Andy, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how you unwind this stuff because you now have millions of layers. I mean, I postulated a few weeks ago that one of the ways these guys could make money is by renting out layers in their stack. So you
Mm.
could actually rent a layer in the deep learning module itself for ChatGPT. And there are certain rules of what you could do and not do, but just like seeing what comes and goes, just the telemetry would be kind of interesting, and you could bake in your rules or tendencies or whatever. I mean, there is this presumption, for example, with Google that, oh, it's organic search, almost like it's a free service provided by the ether. It's like, no, there's a for-profit company which has built these engines, and guess what? They've kind of become muscle bound because you go for searching for something, and what do you get? All these ad sponsors. I mean, just one pet peeve I'll throw at you. I've noticed that on these app stores, when you go, I want to buy the app Zoom, and you search for Zoom and hit enter, and the first one that shows up is like Microsoft meetings, whatever. I'm like, no, I want Zoom, and that's like second or third down. It's like, guys, come on, man. Like people are going to default to the top thing because you're just in a hurry doing stuff, and sometimes it's even similarly named, and like, oh, this isn't the app I wanted. Well, it's on your phone now. I don't know, Andy. How do you bake ethics into these practices in any meaningful way that has teeth?
Well, I mean, you made the point earlier, Eric, about are there going to be regulations or some type of laws related to that? And I think when there's danger involved in
Hmm.
anything, in any type of business or service or whatever, regulation is not a bad thing.
Right.
And I think we need some self-regulation from the industry. So, for example, there's right now I'm part of a technical committee for an organization called Oasis Orbit Open. And what we're setting is data standards around provenance. So, where did the data come from? Was it acquired ethically? Do they have the right
Right.
to sell it?
Right.
How close to first party data is it?
Right.
These are really fundamental sort of standards that can help change the outcome.
Yeah.
On the other side, I had the privilege of being with a number of insurance regulation people on Monday and talking about how do we understand what these third party software, AI agents are doing along with the third party data. How do we understand that, make sure that discriminatory activities aren't going forth,
Right.
that bias isn't involved. And so you have people at the right levels really starting to think about these things, but we're still early on. So we need to
Right.
combine these standards, regulations, people who care about protecting the individual, and that all has to happen in concert. We're just early.
Mm.
It's people think, yes, I agree, Jess. I mean, we've had AI since the 60s, like you said. I mean, absolutely. We should know better by now.
Right.
But we don't, because it just became available to everybody a few years ago. We
Right.
put a powerful tool in the hands of the average individual who has no idea what it means and how to really use it.
Right.
And so we're in a weird period of time where we got to bring these things together and really put some strong sort of guidance in place, guide rails.
Well, and you know what I just figured out, and our first break is coming up here. Because I always sit there, I think about things from different perspectives. And I think about it from the user perspective, from the designer perspective. I think about it from the business for profit perspective, because I run a business. It's not a nonprofit. Not that I make a lot of profit, but it's not a nonprofit. And I think about it from the regulator's perspective, and how would regulators act? And usually auditors and regulators, they will check like advertising, for example. That's why a lot of doctors who do like stem cell therapy won't advertise that, because they know even it'll get them clients, it's more going to get them scrutiny from regulators who can probably shut them down. So it's like you got to watch out for these things. But I just realized in this call that regulators are going to get their own agents. Their own agents are going to be crawling around, right? So of course they are, like looking, knocking on doors. Oh, what's going on over here? What's going on over there? Looking for signatures of things. You think about how effective the Shazam algorithm is, and it's being used to catch people using copyrighted material. So it's like if you load a video that's got a music song from Taylor Swift, it's going to get shut down real quick because that's
Mm.
baked deep into the architecture. So the power is everywhere, and it's like, oh, we need transparency. But folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio with an all-star cast: Andy Hanna of University of Pittsburgh, Jessica Talisman of Adobe, and Nikolai Mentchoukov from Mench.ai has joined us. We'll bring him in just one second. But we're talking all about ethics and AI, and wondering, scratching our heads, how are these crazy things happening? And yeah, I think that, frankly, a lot of it boils down to lack of education, understanding about how certain tools and technologies work. To Andy's point, this is very new stuff for most people. And when you work with an LLM, for example, you're amazed at how much it knows. But then people are starting to figure it out. Like a friend of mine posted yesterday, I just figured out all the hallucinations in a very real and compelling way, because she asked about Ozzy Osbourne's death, and it said, oh no, he's fine. Everything is good. It's just rumors. And I asked it a couple days ago about, I said, did the US really destroy Iran's nuclear program? It said, no, no, there are rumors about that, but everything is fine. I'm like, are you sure? Because I think that we attacked with B 2 bombers. It's like, oh, yes, this is what happened. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, that's not a small thing to get wrong. Like, did we blow this building up or not? Like, oh, no, it's just rumors. I'm like, I'm looking at a blown up building. And in the military world, by the way, they call that ground truth. So, ground truth is what's really happening. The report may come in that this village is not under attack, but there are bullets flying over your head. You're like, it is. I'm here and I hear the bullets. So that's ground truth. And Jessica, that's what we need from these things, right? So that's why you have RAG models, for example, and I like graph RAG, because you need explainability and you have to ground these things to get the right answers, right? It's almost like dealing with
Right.
your teenager. I'm going to ground you if you don't tell me who knocked over the milk
Yes.
on the floor. What do you think, Jessica?
Well, in so many companies, there's a difference. I straddle the world of library science and
Hmm.
libraries and cultural institutions and corporate America.
Right.
And the problem is in corporate America, we're very much stuck in data architectures, and data
Mm.
is the ground truth, and that can be very syntactic.
Mm.
And in fact, something that library science brings to us is knowledge infrastructures, which are these dynamic sort of knowledge graph-based architectures that
Right.
take it a step further beyond just data, that we have information that and knowledge, and that there's some recency and truth. Just as an example, I was curious about news cycles and how AI might interpret those news cycles in terms of ethics and reliability from a data perspective, and created a little workflow and daily news updates, and just to
Hmm.
see what AI would serve to me.
Right.
And a lot of it really wasn't recent relative or something, particularly reliable. We're seeing this division where, because the education part of AI has fallen behind, we end up with a very polarized understanding of AI, either that it's very
Hmm.
good and it's going to
Right.
cure all diseases, or
Good
it's
point.
very bad
Right.
and it's going to kill humanity. And
Right.
there's no real middle ground. And part of that really has to do with education. Things like, are we integrating AI into educational institutions? Andy, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. Too soon? And have our frameworks for education kept up,
Hmm.
so that we can have a more educated population with an understanding of what the capacity of these tools are and where critical thinking or media literacy is needed.
You just threw in the magic two words that I was going to throw out. Critical thinking. That's what you're supposed to learn in school, is how to learn, is how to dissect information, distill information, understand a corpus of information. There are bodies of work, for example, you want to examine. Those are all excellent, excellent points. And I actually want to talk to you more about the library science stuff either later in the show or offline, because I think it's an imperative part of the picture that is overlooked right now. And so I'll throw it over to Nikolai to tell us a bit about what he's doing. But I'll just throw out there, syntax, language, words. You figure Google built an empire on keywords. That's it.
Mhm.
Their keywords were their empire. So you'd buy AdWords, you'd search for keywords, it would give you results. I mean, they've done all sorts of great work to fine tune that, but it's just words and text. Language is just a very thin layer of abstraction that ostensibly represents the real world, but it's very thin. It's very, very small, and it can be misinterpreted. There are all kinds of things that can happen to it.
Language is very political.
It's also political, right? Even
Sure.
the terms that you use, like, not to go down a wormhole, but like conservative versus progressive. What the hell does that mean? I would say it means almost nothing these days, especially when they all flip sides. But anyway, Nikolai, I'll bring you in. Nikolai Mentchoukov. I tell
Yeah.
stories about you all the time. I say, my buddy
Okay. Yeah.
Nikolai.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's how I think. You see, with that accent.
That's
Yeah. We
funny.
actually have an opposite challenge, and that's
Okay.
what I will introduce you to a different side of that.
Oh,
So
please.
no, I'm from advertising world. Yeah. So we were excited when we built an ad that is designed to talk back and execute tasks. So it's not something you just see, but you can interact and expect that you interact essentially with the product, the service, whatever object becoming alive.
Hmm.
And of course, no, it comes with a lot of benefits for advertisers, but also it makes it almost like a social kind of network aspect when people communicate not only with people, but with objects, yes, that surround us. And I was so excited. I sent. It's also very mobile, so you can actually. It's very easy to put on any website, and that makes it very easy because there is nothing technical about that. The whole this thing, to make it, we had to come up with a model that is different from ChatGPT, because uh, how we see that, and that's how people see AI these days, that is something very smart. So you can compare that to like what we know as a book smart, like professors, for example. Yes, someone that knows everything about everything and can help with research in many different is essentially part of our life. But how smart the ad should be. And the problem is this book smart thing, it's all great, this AI agent as people know them, but it's very expensive. It takes a lot of time. No, it costs a lot of money to make something very effective uh, um, in terms of like book smart kind of criteria. There's another type of smartness that we know is a streetwise. And the streetwise smart people, we know it, uh, they learn, they might not never read a single book, but they actually equally smart in their domain, usually that evolves through interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So they essentially emerge through interactions and through the social no interaction with the society. Essentially, as we know, the kind of no, this example, for example, if you saw this movie, analyze that, analyze this, analyze that, you have a gangster that is streetwise, and you have a professor that is PhD professor. And the irony is, at the end of the movie, we realize that they are equally smart. They just exist in different domains. So that we developed this model that is based on that idea that is designed to learn through interactions rather than a lot of information. That makes it very affordable and fast and light and thing, but not this kind of would call it dumb AI. Yes, it's not really smart at all. Like if you compare it to the domain of the book smart
Right.
criteria. So we got excited that we made it. It's actually very interesting. And I made a call to my friend, and so we made this exciting cat that can talk back and execute on tasks. And the first question my friend asked, can it do porn? And I was like, oh my God, I never thought of that. So I started thinking, okay, so who we protect actually ethically now? So I don't want, actually, I didn't even know what to answer because I had no idea. Because with our model, it's not trained model. Yes, we call it not trained. Because instead of training here, what is happening technically, so you understand, it has access to, through APIs and all sort of like basically setting, it has information specific to that product or services or whatever it is object in real time. So for every interaction, whatever people ask, that it has very fast access to whatever it's related to. So it's kind of learning through that moment. It doesn't remember that fast, of course, it's not the goal. Maybe eventually it will. And it's actually getting the progressing, the cognitive progress is actually, based on our data, at least shows it's actually smarter than the books in some ways than book smart, like AI progress. But regardless, so what we realized that we have to deal because of that nature that it talks to many, many different people, and they can ask whatever they can ask, but that is not like kind of ChatGPT is one for everyone. Yes, this thing is specific to that specific like business. It may be local business, yes, like restaurant or dentist or like real estate. And if people start asking such things, it may result is essentially abusing AI. And to prevent it is not a trivial task, because if you send these things to AI, then it will complete destruction, because the whole point of this thing that is run through social thing, but not that brutal. It's not a gangster really. Yes, it's not like something that learned through interactions in that domain. So it appears that we never were scientists, but in that sense, we kind of realized that we're in that situation when we have to be, in a sense. We start to learn how people, when they communications, daily interactions, regardless of how smart they are, to act. So sometimes they may say something rude, but they don't really mean it. And sometimes they actually say something really what they think is funny, which is very abusive for someone. Yes, and everything in between. And in order to understand all that and what actually to do with someone, let's say it's a local dentist and someone that can you do porn, yes, you have to create a set of a structure where you want to prevent actually no, to do your best to
Guardrails.
prevent to go to AI, because the moment it goes to AI, it creates a tremendous problem basically, because then it goes back with something, and now you have to deal with that on our level, yes. And so we started a research that we decided to do, okay, let's make something in parallel, regardless of business or everything. Let's try to create environments where we can learn through these interactions how people actually ethically relate and how AI understand it in terms of ethics. So in one of the things we call it AI ethic code. We made a policy, it's not really a policy because it's kind of not a rule, it's some sort of like kind of like if you have a rule in your family, for example, just set of rules, moral rules, that we call that we made a series of prompts where AI, it doesn't go to AI. The idea was to create, to define as many as possible questions or ideas, whatever people can ask or say, to react based on that, just because we know as a human that's what the reaction should be based on our ethical approach to that. And what that allowed to do is that, for example, if someone rude, if someone asking something, acting mean or rude to AI, it can react by saying, look, if you tell me one more time something like this, I will never talk to you again. And interesting, if you say that, because technically, because it's an ad, technically it's very easy to disappear, say, I'm gone, okay? And then you set the cookies, and this cookie, again, can be based on ethical conditions. So we can give a person a chance to be kind, just to show something. You say, oh, do you want to talk to this ad again? Be kind. And so you can actually create a set of ethical rules on a practical level to help to protect AI, okay, from bad behavior, from rude people, from unethical, action or whatever. And that's actually equally. So it's who trains who.
Hmm.
Interestingly, so we, for example, in order in this research, we made a few. We call them interactive portals. With the different goals to emulate kind of social situation that we have in this kind of streetwise common practice in our life. For example, comedy club. So we said if you, because you have more, no, with our model, you have more than one, you have as many as you want. So you can put like, let's say 5, 6 comedians that make comedy real time stand up. And then people can interact with them and crack jokes. And these guys, they not book smart. So the idea is there is no predefined jokes if someone interacts in real life. Yes, like if you have like comedian, of course you have your
Yeah, it's a different
jokes
set of
already
rules.
memorized. Yes, so
Right.
but in this case, if you interact in real life with someone, how do you know what they ask? Just many people. Yes. So what it creates a situation when it was very interesting for us to learn how these during these interactions, on one hand, the AI becoming more funny, just kind of, and that humor helps to the cognitive progress in general, because it's interesting. Humor is interesting. If someone saying a joke, to understand, so essentially the person who says the joke and the person who understands the joke have to be equally smart. Otherwise, there
Yeah.
is no connection, no reflection.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We're
So
getting into
so
the nation. Yeah, well, we got a
so
commercial break coming up here, but we'll pick this up after the break. It's very interesting. I want to get deeper into these models that you developed because you picked up on something that we really don't see. And there's all this policing online and Facebook and LinkedIn. And, oh, don't do that, and they put you in jail for a week and all this stuff. We've seen that. I don't know how effective that is, or it's a little bit strange, but it is kind of necessary. But we'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio. What a fascinating show. We're talking to Andy Hanna of Pitt, Jessica Talisman of Adobe, and Nikolai Mentchoukov, my good buddy from Mench.ai, Mench.ai, who has built a framework. And Andy, I'll throw it over to you. That was very interesting about, first of all, this book smart versus street smart, which is very interesting. I think that's almost like LLMs versus reasoning models, is what they're talking about these days. But he makes a whole bunch of really good points about how people interact, and you talk about ethics and what we want to have as an ethical standard. And most of these social media platforms will say, don't insult people. I mean, it's pretty easy to tell you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. I mean, these are insults going back and forth. So that's fairly easy to police. But at a certain point, does that even help? How can we be more, I don't know, productive in our ethical constructs? And he made an interesting point of identify it in a RAG model, let's say, identify in the RAG model, okay, this doesn't look appropriate. Find a way to mitigate that before you go and hit the AI, because the AI will learn from things. I mean, this is what the Tay experience gave us, so you have to kind of monitor that. But geez, monitoring behavior turns out to be pretty darn complicated and rife with troubles, right? Because if you try to discipline too much, you get rebellion. If you don't discipline enough, you get lackadaisical attitudes. It's like, how do you discipline AI? I guess is the question. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Nikolai, I love the idea, and if I understand it correctly, it's sort of programming, teaching the agent or AI what ethics is, and then asking the question, is the AI acting ethically? I think that I'd love to learn more about that because I think the challenge with ethics is that really easy on the extremes,
Right.
good and bad, gets a little bit tougher in the gray, gets a little bit tougher geographically. So the definition of ethics may be different from me than it is from somebody else. So we are putting some sort of bias into that. And I don't know enough, Nikolai. I'm not saying that there's anything biased about what you're doing. These are theoretic questions that run through my mind just off of the little that I've learned here. So if I'm teaching my brand of ethics, is that good enough? And that's why, when I teach the concept, this type of concept to students, I really focus on fairness, right? So what I ask the students to think about is in whatever the output is of the models that you're running, who is being disadvantaged?
Hmm.
Is there a population that is being treated within a subpopulation within a larger population that's being treated differently or unfairly? And the different, so you can quantify that easier, right? So somebody, like we were talking in one of the breaks earlier about some programs that might be discriminating against a particular gender or something like that, you can measure that. Ethics is a tough one to measure, but it's a great start, right? It is programming that in. You're teaching just like you teach a child, right? What's good and bad. So I'm going to go back to what we said in the first segment, is that this is not software. We're not saying it's human, but it's learning, it's teaching. So as we start to integrate these types of discipline into the models that we're building, it is going to.
Oops, we
Oops.
lost him. Oh,
Oh no.
yeah, he froze up there. The AI algorithm didn't like that, and it was like,
No.
we're gonna cut his network access. But Jessica, I'll throw it over to you
Yeah.
to comment on this. I mean, I think so. Again, you have all these layers in these
Yeah.
models, and you can have all sorts of layers in your AI agents as well. And you can have, I mean, it does cost a little bit more, but ask the question, is this appropriate or not? Ask the question, is this appropriate or not? And take different courses of action accordingly. That's kind of what Nikolai is talking about. And I think it's very interesting, this street smart versus book smart.
I've been thinking about the same thing as the street smart. I just had a discussion the other day about street smart. I mean, I don't want my agents to be gangsters per se.
Right.
And we've seen some of these examples from training
It's a quote.
on if you look at what Grok has become and some of the news around Grok with anti-Semitism and discrimination or AI models, early ones that clearly trained on sentiment analysis based on Reddit,
Right.
which
Right.
it has a certain leaning. And
Right.
so there is a balance. And I think that's what Nikolai was pointing to, is finding that balance. But who gets to create those frameworks for ethics?
Right.
This
Right.
reminds me, this is the most important thing, is like there is a segment of ethics. It's specifically around social ethics.
Hmm.
And it really falls into this domain, which extends. It's not just one type of ethic, or a domain of ethics. It's integrating and understanding also communities.
Hmm.
And the distribution educational frameworks are included in that. Does religion belong in that? Not necessarily, but some users are definitely going to lean towards that being their primary ethical compass.
Sure. Sure.
Right. So it becomes very difficult to appease the masses when you have
Right.
such a large distribution of so many different types of ethics.
Right.
And so are we looking at customized ethics? How do we determine bias? There are specific models in the library science domain that is centered around more balanced frameworks for determining bias. But that's a very, very tricky, slippery slope when we
Sure.
start to get into these distributed communities. And libraries have dealt with this since the beginning of time. It,
That's
yeah,
very interesting stuff. And I'm gonna pick on Anthropic again because
yeah,
the latest story that came out was how, oh, now the CEO, if she sent an email out, which be careful about that, guys, FYI, like maybe talk about it in conversation. And of course, Read AI is transcribing all this stuff too. So it's like you got to be careful what you say on these webinars too, because it's all getting transcribed. But he came out and said, "Oh, our policy of no bad person should benefit from our technology is not a reasonable business strategy." So he's saying, "I'm going to take money from Qatar and UAE and these dictatorships," and he's saying, "Oh, those are bad people." And I'm thinking to myself, look, man, I've been to UAE a couple of times. I have a lot of Muslim friends. Why are you presuming that these are bad people because they're dictators? Like, do you respect other cultures or not? And other cultures, you don't have the same kind of democratic processes that we do. And does that make us necessarily better than those people? Like, I don't think so. I'm not sure that's true at all. So, like, these are, but to your point, Jessica, this is complicated. And Andy, I'll throw, I'm gonna throw it back to you real quick, and then we'll get Nikolai in the final segment. But it is complicated, and it does boil down to really, I think, what should be basic norms. Like, has someone been harmed? Should you be nice to people? Yes, you can joke about things, but don't be mean. And you look at Google, what was their tagline? Don't be evil or something. It's like, all right, that's a
No
little bit,
longer.
that's great. I guess they let go of that. That's pretty funny. Andy, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to what Jess said earlier. It's like we've been dealing with this since the beginning of time for a long. I mean, so people, we somehow think that, these algorithms, these agents, should be perfect. I mean, there
Hmm.
is this conception of that,
Right.
and people are biased. People are good and bad bias, right? There are bad people and good people in the world. It's like we have been dealing with this issue related to humans, for a million years.
Right.
And, so now, like we talked about, this new technology appears on the scene within the last few years for the population, not, it's been around. And so what have we learned from the past million years about how to train ourselves, how to understand our own behavior so that
Right.
it's not evil or
Right.
that it's for the good of society? And that becomes the challenge is how do we translate that learning
Hmm.
into how we're dealing with agents and AI and the purpose for them.
Yeah.
So again, we're so early. I mean, I love this conversation because we're talking about different ways to solve this problem, but I can't wait to have this conversation 5 years from now
Right.
because it's going to be so different because we've learned even more. We're on an exponential learning curve here.
Right. Well, and you think about large language models, and podcast bonus segment is coming up in just a minute here. Ever since these things came out, I have to tell you, what I've been doing is thinking about how do I think? How do I absorb information? Right. It's like, and I get deep into the physiological side, the mystical side, all these different aspects of it. It's very interesting because you realize that your impressions in the early days when you're a baby and 1 and 2 and 3 years old are crucially important for shaping who you are.
Great
Not that
point.
they'll make you a good person or a bad person, but this is your foundational worldview. And we talked before the show about going to other countries and seeing what it's like over there, which I think is probably the most valuable thing you can do, especially as a teenager or kind of early 20s or something, because you're still young enough to be impressionable, right? That's what we are. We're impressionable until we're not. And if you're not impressionable, then are you closed minded? And kind of the answer is yes, right? And so we want these models to learn. We want us to learn. I keep thinking about me. I want, how do I learn? How do I change my behavior based upon new information and new rules and policies? And I think the bottom line is that policies should be pretty easy to define. If you really sit back and think, it's like do no harm, don't hurt people, don't steal or break stuff. That's a pretty basic policy. Be respectful. So the simpler they get, I think, the better. But folks, we'll be back for podcast bonus second. In a second, you're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, time for the podcast bonus segment. Great show today with Andy Hanna, Jessica Talisman, and Nikolai Mentchoukov. And Nick, you made a really interesting point here because you've got these ads that talk to you. They're interactive, they're like agents, but you want them to behave. And you're saying, well, how do you emulate good behavior? And you made a really interesting point that a person of integrity will be honest. They won't lie. Number one, you never lie, always tell the truth. and be sensitive about how you say things. Don't say too much at one particular time, for example. There are some basic rules you can come up with, but you've kind of ascertained this through your research. And you made a really good point about what did you call it? Like sort of a cultural or an empathetic nuance. So you want to define ethical behavior in terms of patterns of behavior and watching out for when someone's in a bad mood, for example. But go ahead, you got 6 minutes.
Yeah. So the idea is kind of if you apply it on just how we interact with each other, anybody can be in a bad mood, yes, and you come home and maybe you're angry or just had bad day or just lost, in a casino or whatever, but you're still who you are. You're a good person. Okay, so the challenge here is if such person talk to an ad, for example, or any AI chat, yes, uh, would it be helpful for AI to realize, to understand that nuance of this emotional and cultural nuance that can be associated with that specific moment. Yes,
Hmm.
and still, based on that understanding of the character style, for example, of that person, to answer with a sympathy, yes, or empathy or a kindness, even though it's understand that situation is challenging. Yes, it basically can be abused even. Yes, so can you be like as a human feel fear, but answer with empathy? You see,
Mm.
and that's what when we talk. No, like in this thing, that's how what we realize that to make AI kind of streetwise and to kind of have this cognitive progress based on that, we have to introduce this emotional nuance and cultural nuance in consideration, and so it will be somehow participate in the thinking process of AI. It's like we think that's essentially, even though I agree with Andy, it's not. I agree actually with that completely. It's not a software, yes, but it's not human. But ironically, it thinks like us, like human.
Hmm.
We think simultaneously. We not think step by step. Like, for example, we cannot judge ourselves based on the moral values. Okay, I have this thought. For example, how many stars on the sky? Yes, in the sky. Yes, and then, but let's run it through my moral values. How to answer? Yes, on that. Let's run it through my mood. Let's run it to my, like current, like family situation, or like I'm angry, like my emotions. Yes, at the moment. So if you take all these things, we think simultaneously, like this Marvin Minsky described this process as like our brain can process millions of signals simultaneously. We're not thinking step by step. So the AI, interestingly, in that sense, thinks the same way. Like it's basically you kind of put a prompt, yes, and it answers you right away. And the question is, did it take these ethical, moral, emotional, cultural values and that answer simultaneously?
Yeah.
And what we think, no, based on how we understand it today,
Right.
it's possible. And
Right.
if you have that, then you have absolutely, perfect person, yes, human
Yeah.
being that, regardless of the situation, emotions, circumstances, then it's always help you, us. It's kind of makes it a mirror, but it's a mirror that helps us to be trained through that whatever training. It's training through the interactions, but it helps us to train ourselves how to think, yes,
Yeah.
how to react on our own emotions, reaction, how to even be good man, yes.
Yeah.
So
You
this is
I'm gonna close this out here with an excellent analogy because everything maps back to Seinfeld. So anyone who's watched Seinfeld, the whole series, if you've seen every show, everything you can talk about in the world will map back to one Seinfeld episode. And there's a great one all about context, and it's when George is working for the Yankees and he's getting along with these guys from some Texas team, which is like the Texas Rangers, and their semantic model is to insult each other, but they're just joking, like "you bastard," this and that. And they go back, and then his boss walks down the hallway and like hears this, and he thinks that, "Oh my God, you're being so rude to these people." Like, no, he's being nice to them because
yeah,
that's their context, that's their cultural nuance, is
exactly,
that they
yes.
rib each other, and that's okay in that environment. But it's not okay if the person, say, is from New Hampshire or something. And so it's like these culture, and Jessica, you even talked about that. Maybe we'll get final closing comments from each of you. Jessica, you talked about that in how in certain cultures there are certain mores and ways of doing things And now these engines could get that specific, right? 1 minute. What are your thoughts, Jessica?
I mean, it's AI. I do believe in Alison Gopnik's summary of AI as a cultural technology, much like the internet and paper, even,
Yeah,
book, typewriter. And so these cultural technologies are integrated, or they become integrated, embedded into our everyday lives, and we're headed there. So the cultural nuances and the specifics, my biggest concern is that we have a couple generations of kids that have not necessarily had the moral guidance,
right.
ethical guidance that maybe prior generations have had, more rigidly within the educational systems.
Yeah,
We have a couple generations that have been raised by social media, and
right.
what is that imparting to those people? I mean, do we accept it as our reality, or do we take this as an opportunity to to construct ethics and guidelines to drive this and also limit the interaction? Like, I can't help but think that there's an element where we need to hold the cart back, or the
Right,
cart before the horse. We're in
right,
a situation where we're leaping ahead of the technology because we
right,
don't have those frameworks in place.
right.
So, there's something that ACRL, the American College of Research Libraries, have put out in a statement a good 4 or 5 years ago. No human, no AI. And I think
Mm,
that is where I'm sort of moving forward. And my thinking on this is that it truly is, to Andy's point at the very beginning, you said it's really a partnership. And
mm.
we need to treat
Wow.
it as such. So
Yeah, and in terms of shepherding our next generation into the real world, why, Andy Hanna, final thoughts from you. You're out there dealing with these young kids with Blue Street data. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah,
1 minute.
I mean, I think we should do a whole segment on, using AI in an educational environment,
Yeah,
because there's so much that can be a petri dish of where we learn how to ethically use it, responsibly use it, and that's a lot of what Pitt is aimed at doing. But one of the things I just want us to also think about is that, like Nikolai said, it's not humans, not software. It's learning and growing, in the food that we give these agents is the data.
right,
And if we feed it with bad data, with low quality, with unethical, with not true data, you're going to get bad outcomes. You're going to get hallucinations. You're going to get false history. So, and I don't think
mm,
we've placed enough emphasis on the provenance of the data and the quality
mm-hmm,
of the data. And
mm-hmm.
of course, Eric, that's what we do at Blue Street Data, but that is true. It is what comes out of the other end is what's processed that comes in the front end.
Yeah. Wow, what a fantastic show today, folks. We'll get all these people back on. If you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. Wonderful talking to you folks. Jessica Talisman, Andy Hanna, Nikolai Mentchoukov. Look them up on the LinkedIn. We'll talk to you next week, folks. You've been listening to DM Radio.